That'd be 10
Gav
o'clock.
and Catherine.
It's 10 o'clock. Good morning, and how are you from EV Cafe Towers? Welcome to the news and views with us, the EV Cafe, 30 minutes of what's happening in zero-emission transport with expert analysis brought to you this week in partnership with the Commercial Vehicle Show, where the fans of vans, trucks and all things commercial hang out. See us at the Birmingham NEC on the 23rd to the 25th. With the EV Cafe Village. Now, we've got a few pods left, and you need to get back to us by Monday, the 8th of April, to book your spot. Paul, why would people want to exhibit at the CV show with us?
They have a plethora of reasons to come. So we've got 3 days of seminars. We've got Mike Hawes from the SMMT. He's a very well known and actually has been considered inspirational speaker on the subjects of all things automotive. And we've got a lot of stuff around launching e-truck plans, e-van plans, lots of things around the industry. Exciting, but also on the Thursday, skills shortage, the training, skills, apprenticeships, all of that sort of stuff is going to be there. Of course, the EV Cafe Village is going to be there front and center. We've got some exciting things coming up, discussions even today that will help shape the future of automotive. Wow. There's going to be other launches across the show from, and we'll perhaps touch on these in more detail next week. Canoe coming over from America, not as in a canoe, it's actually a van called a canoe. And there's Bion, Pelcan, strange names all over the place, but they're all coming and they're all new and they're all vans. So exciting. Destination Net Zero, lots and lots of trucks over there. Some fantastic stuff coming. You have to get to the Commercial Vehicle Show, 23rd to the 25th. Get your free tickets on the link on the post today from me, or we'll put a link in here and everywhere else.
If you do want to reach out, then Caroline Kirby is our event manager, caroline.kirby@evcafe.org, if you want to find out more. Plus, and this is exciting stuff, hold your breath, there's a joint EV Cafe and Stuart Signs bowling event on the evening of Tuesday the 23rd, the first night of the CV show at the Hollywood Bowl in Resort World. It starts at 6 o'clock, and if you want to come along and bowl with the legend that is Sarah Sloman, then you can. So,
I'm not there.
well, you might be. I thought you were saying you might be. All right, well, you can't bowl with Sarah, so use a ball instead. You can email Kirsty Robinson at Stuart Signs. So it's kirsty.robinson@stuartsigns.co.uk to find out more. Now, we went bowling a little while ago. Johnny dinged his wheels, I seem to recall, on the curb that night. Who won the bowling? I can't recall.
Still hear it. Still hear the crunch.
So, Johnny, you won the bowling.
I believe so, after 4 strikes, consecutive strikes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So Johnny's the man to beat. So 23rd, Tuesday, at Birmingham Hollywood Bowl in Resort World. We gon' be there. Be there. Get your fingers in the holes. And let's knock down some pins. Let's move on. Adverts done. Don't even go there, Sam. Adverts done. So grab a cuppa and plug in to what's been happening in zero-emission transport this week. And coming up, the zero-emission van plan was championed by Paul in the EV Cafe when Paul met Transport Minister Anthony Brown. Ooh.
He met me. Yes.
Of course.
Oh, wow.
That's what he said. Volvo's last diesel cars have rolled off the production line as the focus switches to electric. The government has been urged to hold the aviation industry accountable for emissions reduction. A social electric vehicle leasing scheme for care workers is being called for. And finally, local authorities are facing significant challenges in achieving their net zero targets. But first, it's all about Paul. Transport Minister Anthony Brown has met the driving forces of the zero-emission van plan at the DFT. The roundtable discussions included representatives from the EV Cafe, the Association of Fleet Professionals, the British Vehicle Rental and Leasing Association, and Logistics UK. They were joined by Duncan Webb, Fleet Director of the AA, Colin James of DPD, Sarah Gray, love a bit of Sarah Gray, Head of Zero-Emission Vehicle Strategy and Development at Dawson Dawson Group Vans, and Speedy Services Fleet Director Aaron Powell, who's recently been given an award. The challenges around the adoption of electric vans, including problems with legislation around the 4.25 derogation, were discussed with the Minister. Paul, you were at the meeting. Was the net zero van plan well received by the Minister, and what happens now?
It was very well received. He was informed, as you'd expect him to be. So he'd obviously been professionally briefed. I think it would be fair to say he understood some of the numbers and was aware of, some of the money that was going around. I think a few of the things that he really sort of latched onto was the legislation requiring clarification around the 4.25 ton derogation, which is incredibly grey and makes it very difficult. We had Speedy Services, as you mentioned, DPD, the AA, Dawson Group Vans, all as operators in the room, and they all said the same thing. It was very, very clear. But encouragingly, actually in his constituents, Welch's Transport have started an initiative to share their charging infrastructure with other operators under, with health and safety guidance, all the permissions that you would require to come on and off sites and things like that. And he was really interested in that sort of shared infrastructure that operators can use to kind of sort of leapfrog from one step to the next around the country with using behind the wire charging, which is a really interesting opportunity. But it was warmly received. We had 3 members of the Office for Zero Emissions Vehicles in the room, 2 deputy heads, and so we had the right level of engagement. It was really positive, with everybody playing a significant part. It was really good.
And that's fabulous to hear. And Sam, building on that EHGV programme, I guess, with trucks being a significant part of logistics as well, is there that same push for support from government in terms of legislation? And are you finding that people are looking to share the infrastructure as part of your project?
Yes and no. I think certainly from one perspective, the truck world is long behind the van world in terms of understanding. So it's all bubbling away in the background, and I have many meetings with different government bodies and standards and government agencies in order to talk about what legislation needs to come through to make sure that we don't we try not to drop the ball too much in some of this stuff. There's a couple of legacy related issues which haven't yet come to fore, but they may. For example, you can't pull fuel with an electric truck because it's deemed a hazard, whereas you can pull fuel with an internal combustion engine. Doesn't quite make sense, does it? And the other thing we've got to think about is things like tacho brakes. Now, when you're charging a vehicle, is that work or is that not work? Well, it doesn't feel like work. That doesn't mean the legislation states that way. Yeah, but plugging it in is, and if you have to be there, or I agree with you, Paul, but that doesn't necessarily is how it's drafted in legislation. So there's lots of things coming which we need to make sure we iron out so that we don't end up dropping the ball because legacy rules, which never were intended for this purpose, are causing us problems. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the background, John.
Sarah, this is a really exciting part of our world, isn't it? We're lucky enough to work in a part of the industry which is seeing what we are pleased to see is growth. There are some worrying signs in the market, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But managing this growth, you discover huge, I suppose to use a word Sam uses often, inefficiencies in the way we do things. And we're learning all the time.
Yeah, conscious of how policy can be. I've done it myself. Policy that actually in a few years' time becomes out of date, but it was the best you had at the time. Now, the reason I think this is going to go well is 3 things with this van plan. Greater fiscal support, so investment, that's what we need, but coupled with the opportunity to remove those barriers that often cause people to slow things down. So that in itself will accelerate the uptake of the vehicle. So coupled with that is the sharing of charging infrastructure. There isn't a day that goes by where that doesn't get discussed, and the ins and the outs and what other policy legislation will impact that opportunity. So once again, I'm hoping that it's going to be software that saves the day with decent hardware. We shall see.
And Johnny, your experience with Novuna and being out with fleets, are you seeing that businesses are starting to align themselves and sharing infrastructure?
The conversations are being had as we speak, but there are lots of things we need to get over, really. Software being one of them, the unintended consequences of the charge point regulations, and various other things. But in terms of like utilization of their charging infrastructure, supporting other fleets and monetization, those kind of things are naturally having a part in our conversation when designing infrastructure for the future. I'm a bit put off. I can see that Sarah's able to talk without opening her mouth. Or was that just me?
Yeah, but it's a good blue steel look, though, wasn't it? It wasn't there. Look, you meant business.
Right, let's say hello to a few people. And first in through the door is at 9:55. I think that was earlier than some of the presenters. Was Clean Tech Fan, who I now understand is Barbara from YouTube. So Barbara, Simon, and Joe, bless your hearts for being here yet again. I think that's 2 weeks in a row that you have been the first ones through the door, so bless you. Let's go through a few others. Alicia Scully, Dev Chakravarti, who we met at Everything Electric. Dev, wonderful, wonderful man. Catherine Brandt, who's always right. Darren Anvona. Johnny Berry, golly, he's here in the flesh. Hello.
He's here.
The aforementioned Sarah Gray. Hello, David Bushnell. Russ Morgan. Met Russ. What a wonderful man he is. Love, hug, and squeeze you, my friend. Who else we got? Ash Bannister. Hello. Richie Martin, sales guru and bouncing ball of the EV Cafe. Kirsty Robinson, again aforementioned. Stuart Signs. So tap her up to come bowling. Charlie Gilbert. People still loving your podcast, my friend. Tony Clayton, who comes with an apology. Haven't been able to make this for a few weeks, so looking forward to it. Tony, where have you been, my friend? And thank you for coming back. Chris Griffin, Martin Sweeney, David Bushnell, Natasha Waller from Norfolk. Golly, they've got Tinternet out that way now. Ursula Perry from Greenfleet. Oh, I'm going to get into trouble for that one. Christian Ballman. Hello, Christian. Michael Barton, he's always there. From Cloudy Bristol. Teresa Swift from Formula Space. Tom Middleditch from Europcar. Jim Blair from Arnold Clark. Johnny Berry with lots of words to say this morning. Good man. Rachel Lewis from Compleo. Dean Mahoney. Matthew Ling from sunny Suffolk. Have you got sunshine out there, my lover? Anthony Boyd, I'm sure that's not a Suffolk accent. I do apologise. Where are we? It's all of us. Christopher Nguyen.
I'm lost. Oh, there we go. Sorry, there we go.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to keep their names coming up.
Massive hello to Kate Terrell, who possibly does one of the greatest hugs in the world from Charge Safe. Nick Hulin. Hello, Nick. Clean Tech Fan says, thanks, John, for the shout out. I know Sam is dying every minute I do this, but I love it. Europcar, Karen Moore. Hello. Leo Pickford, Thomas Edwards. But good grief, there's so many people in here. Golly, let's get on, shall we? Item number 2. Volvo.
Can I just say, Marcus Muckle, I love an interruption, as Sam knows. Marcus Muckle going to be joining us with the Monroe. That's exciting. We'll talk more about that next week. But anyway, moving on.
I love that car.
Sorry, John.
No, not at all, because we love a bit of Monroe. In fact, I shall get a prop out from Monroe whilst I'm doing this next article. Volvo has built its last diesel cars, with the firm's plant in Ghent, Belgium, producing its last V60, and then its plant in Torslanda, Sweden, seeing its last XC90 diesel car roll off the production line. These events mark a huge milestone in Volvo Cars' 97-year history. With this move, the company says it's taking a big step towards their ambitions of becoming a fully electric car maker, as well as achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. Sam, your mate Nigel Farage is going to be gutted, isn't he?
Well, probably, yeah. I mean, thank you to Sarah for highlighting this, but I did put a post out on this. And it's quite interesting that I got a lot of negative feedback this time around, whereas the Farage interview didn't. There's an awful lot of people going, it's a mistake. They'll U-turn. Diesel should be here. It should stay. It's a better option. So there's quite a few people that were quite skeptical about this, bizarrely, quite frankly, because diesel sales is plummeting. The manufacturers are not going to U-turn. So I find it quite curious. But I think there's a degree of frustration or people who are just so stuck in their ways in the sort of Farage group that just love their diesels and that's all they want. They don't care anything else. But they're going to have to change, and a company as big as Volvo, under Geely's brand, is putting diesel vehicles, into a museum. I think that's quite telling. Not just that they're stopping production, but they're putting it in a museum. I love the fact that that's the tone of that marketing spin. I think that's brilliant because it just puts people like Nigel Farage in a museum where he belongs.
To balance that, and it's not like me to be negative, but I am going to be. Just in the name of balance, I think. We've got names like Fisker, Arrival, Neo, Volta, Elmo, all going to the wall, struggling. It's not easy out there for new entrants into the electric vehicle market. We've got hybrid sales growing. And according to the SMMT figures this week, we had EV sales as a percentage of all sales falling in the latest figures. It would be easy to see that there's a lack of momentum in the marketplace. Johnny, are you feeling that in the work that you do?
I think you mentioned some startups there that have struggled. I think the likes of Tesla is a real kind of like unique scenario. There's more reasons why they shouldn't have succeeded than they should have. And it's given this kind of confidence in the market because it's extremely difficult in this new space. And I guess we've all got our scars and our wounds, and we learn from that and we get better and we know how to deliver in the future. But, you know, the whole thing around Volvo is now going to put more pressure on manufacturers and innovators to transition and to innovate. But yeah, we are seeing those casualties. And Sam, you listed that off last time we got together. And actually, when you listed it off, there was nearly a dozen or so, I think. And I was thinking, blimey, actually, only when you listed that off, I realised this is a tough industry to be in sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, Tesla, as Darren Anvener rightly points out, almost went bankrupt many times. Elon's got very deep pockets, but the reality is that Tesla have had their worst quarter, I think, in forever. It's been a really, really tough market, and we'd be telling almost untruths if we didn't reflect that in what we say, and we don't do that. We call it as we see it.
We do, and I'm surprised to hear that about Tesla. I don't follow the market share closely enough. But reflecting back in 2019, when Volvo first started thinking about their electric future, that was the one I wanted. I wanted the electric XC40. That was my go-to car that I couldn't wait to get. But at the same time, you had companies like Lexus saying, well, we're not going to, but then they did hybrid and now they've done electric. So I'm watching people change their tune. And even late last night, was scrolling on LinkedIn, and Volta Trucks is under new ownership again. So it's a bit of a Phoenix opportunity. So yeah, funded by Luxor Capital, long-term financial backer. So they've come back as Volta Commercial Vehicles Limited, registered in the UK, which is excellent. So it does confuse me. It comes, it goes, it comes back. And they've tagged a load of really influential people, including someone called Paul Kirby. Interesting.
Let's go to Paul. Electric vans, Paul. How's that market?
Well, the market is down, and that we reflected this back to the minister when we spoke on Tuesday, because we wanted to say, look, you know, with all of the positive noise around the market and all the incentives that are there, we are not in the same place that the car market has been. Now, I don't follow the car market, and I hadn't seen, like you, the Tesla numbers, but we are seeing new entrants come. Canoe have just bought the Arrival switchgear and platforms and all of that sort of stuff. But Canoe have got the same sorts of challenges in America that Arrival were having here. You know, shareholder kickback, some negative stories in the midst of it. And you have to wonder, is there some kind of conspiracy theory at work in the background for the big OEMs, just kind of letting people spend money and then squishing it out in some way, shape or form? Because you would think that somebody should be able to make it, but the way that they're coming to market is very all or nothing. Sometimes not getting over the line. What are the challenges? What are the barriers? Because we could and should maybe as a country put some investment behind making the doors open a little easier.
Well, I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's a strategy, and I would, if I was a big OEM, I would probably welcome. That's what I'd do. Let these guys invest lots of fresh money and understand the market, and then wander in 5 or 10 years later and take that share. It's not pretty. It's not necessarily the right thing to do for SMEs, but that's just life, right? It's economics. It's how it works. And in this particular field of building vehicles is incredibly complex and high cost. And therefore, there's only ever really going to be the big boys who are going to win. It's just
ultimately going to really win. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, the Arrival investment from Hyundai Kia, which is now kind of coming out and resulting in Iveco partnering with Hyundai and Kia on a joint van. Is that technology being brought up and then translated into the Iveco operation and the Hyundai? Because that then is two global OEMs with massive capacity and capability, real knowledge both in electric and in vans. Suddenly it works.
Yeah, to the detriment of millions of people that invested their shares and their efforts into the original Arrival brand, unfortunately, right? So including some people on this call who've we know very well who've suffered the consequences.
Richie Martin supports Johnny. He says, we've all got our scars. They ultimately make us stronger. And I guess as an industry, that's true. And it's something that I'll carry through the day. It's okay to have scars. I think we've all got them. But we have to find ways through, and we have to find the best way to do things. And Jim Blair reminds me of a conversation that we had with Asif Ghafoor this week from BEV, when he says, it's a shame, but Tesla customer service is poor. Forgetting the customer is the biggest sin you can commit in any industry. And I'm afraid Jim's right. And it's very easy just to get wrapped up in running the business and making sure that you've got the widgets. But if at the end of the day, the customer isn't smiling from ear to ear, then you've got to ask the question, why are you doing it? Shall we move on? Because I've got 9 minutes and 3 stories. Here we go. And a coughing fit to have. The Environmental Audit Committee has urged the government to hold the aviation industry accountable for its proposed emissions reductions as it publishes the government's response to its report on net zero information, brilliantly called the Jet Zero Strategy. Published in 2022, the plan expects technological measures like increasing fuel efficiency and the adoption of sustainable aviation fuels to reduce emissions significantly each year. It's a long old story. The reality is, don't we just need to take less flights?
Well, I think as the airport, and in North Somerset we had the airport, and the airport was subject to the same stringent rules as anyone else with any development plans that they had. Now roll on a few years, you've seen all of their, I think they call it landside sort of operations are now electric. But yes, ultimately, like everything, even the comment here today about drinking less coffee, it's all in moderation. So actually, if we can reduce our flights, I do consciously not fly as often as I can each year. I've had to fly once this year. I flew once last year. That is it. And it makes me sad because I want to go to hot, lovely places and have wonderful holidays. I really do. But at the same time, I also don't. So I don't. But I am thinking about a rail trip with my daughter, potentially somewhere wonderful this summer. So you can still have fun when you're not in the air.
Absolutely. We're not saying be boring or not enjoy yourself. What we are saying is that do what you have to do. I for the 2 trips I've done this year that were long distances down to London, it's the train all day. Paul, you take an electric van because you're gifted that way.
I do take the train wherever I can, and I do a lot of my journeys on trains these days because they are it's more productive and obviously lower CO2. So all good news.
And just thinking about it, the Tesla comment about poor customer service. Sam, Sarah, and Johnny, you all drive Teslas. Would you agree with that?
I would. It depends. On certain things, they're excellent. If it's a small thing and they just turn up and fix it, then it's great. But when it becomes a big thing, like a hinge is bent or something, it can be incredibly difficult to get things sorted out. So, yeah, they're probably a bit of a victim of their own growth and success, I think, in a way. So I think I've seen mixed reports. I mean, you always hear the bad news, remember? There's probably thousands and thousands of perfectly sorted out problems that no one's ever talked about. But that's not to hide the fact that I think they do have some challenges with their customer service for sure.
Indeed. Would you agree with that, Johnny?
I think they've fallen on their own sword, I think, to be honest.
Ooh,
the big growth that they've had. They used to be really good. That used to be their bit they flexed on, really. No one complained about the build quality because they fix it quickly and they have great customer service. But personally, I've had no bad experience. But not to say that that's just one experience. So.
And have you sorted out your curbed wheels yet?
I'm the only one that hasn't trashed my wheels. I think I'm the only one out of all of us that hasn't trashed my wheels. I love my Tesla. I really appreciate the customer experience that I've had it for nearly 2 years now. So they've been great to me.
Wow, there you go. Good. So again, balance. That's really interesting. Thank you.
John.
Yes.
Just to reflect on the comment around the aviation regulation, just wanted to highlight, I think this situation presents both a challenge, but also an opportunity for new ideas. So I just want to particularly highlight what we talked about a couple of months ago around Ecotricity's introduction of EcoJet, utilising, I think, hydrogen for their electric flights in the future. So there are innovative ways that look like they're coming in the future to reduce emissions in this space. So both regulations and new ideas is the opportunity here, I think.
And indeed, we spoke to Aerovolt, didn't we, Paul, on the podcast, which is coming in a couple of weeks' time, charging.
Sarah, that you spoke, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. My apologies, Sarah. You know what I'm like, brain of a sieve. Anyway, let's get on with the script, shall we? A social electric vehicle leasing scheme for care workers is being called for by climate charity Possible. It wants a government-backed scheme for care workers so that they can ditch their petrol or diesel cars and switch to a zero-emission vehicle, helping to cut emissions and costs. The UK's 900,000 home care workers account for an estimated 4 million miles driven every day, or 1.5 billion miles a year, significantly contributing to the UK's overall emissions. And in rural and semi-rural areas, essential caring work cannot be realistically done without a car. Now, there's a scheme in France which is currently working, and low-income, high-mileage workers can lease an EV for €100 a month, covering the cost of the car as well as insurance and maintenance. Paul, you're nodding sagely.
I'd heard this story last year and I thought it was genius. France aren't necessarily accelerating maybe at the same way, but they are doing it in the right way, I think. There's a lot of really good stuff. They electrified a whole village, I think. Johnny, you will remember this because I think it was a Renault initiative that they electrified a complete village and doing this scheme to help the people that we are all going, oh, please, somebody help the people at the other end of the spectrum. In other words, those people that are on lower incomes and maybe don't have a home driveway and all that kind of stuff. We want to try to equal the balance. Well, they're doing it. And I think this scheme is a great idea to do it as well. Similarly, with wheelchair accessible vehicles, could we do something similar there to help that sector of the market? I think anything that can be done to bring balance to all the swanky Porsche Taycans and Teslas and all of that kind of stuff. Let's have some low-cost, low-income friendly vehicles.
Matthew Ling says it's a great idea for leasing scheme for care workers. Suffolk has already started looking at options. And Darren Anvona talks about lots of nano cars. Nano. Or Mork and Mindy. Does anybody remember?
Yeah, I remember this. It goes over the back of the sofa.
Who can do that?
Easy, no problem.
So yes, nano cars. We saw at Everything Electric, Microlina, very, very small, like a little bubble car. Fantastic piece of kit. I mean, even I could get in at 6'4" and about 25 stone. Sarah?
I was just thinking about the Sebastian Leitner from Sponsor Spirit released a post this week about the open letter to Europe written by the chap who runs Renault. And he's got a really good point. If you read through it, it's really worth it. It's about 20 pages. But he makes the point that we need more smaller passenger vehicles. So we're not talking about giving someone a 2-ton Tesla like I've got to drive around and do this wonderful job. We're talking about equity again. We're talking about making sure that everyone has access to transport, to work, and to an opportunity for a clean emission future for their role. And I love this story. I really want to get behind it. And yeah, if you could just sort of split my battery in two, I'd donate half of it. I really would.
I definitely think that's your new nickname, Sarah. 2-ton Tesla. Sam.
2-ton Tesla.
I was just going to say that this is actually an element. This is a logistics challenge, right? This is just moving people around. And what's good about it as well is that we know the state of the data, and the stats in terms of where people are going and what they're doing. So these social workers, it should be fairly easy to map and work out exactly what mileage they need, what vehicles would suit them, because they're doing the same thing every day. So there's no reason at all why this couldn't be implemented in such a way that that can work without failure, because it's predictable, is my point. It's not that we end up giving people vehicles that aren't suitable for the job, because we know where they're going and what they're doing already. So I think as an opportunity to electrify a huge number of vehicles, more effort and more attention should be placed on this. I think it's a low hanging fruit at the back of the tree that no one's spotted yet in the UK, at least. And we should grab it.
You're right. Martin Sweeney says net zero transport for all. We call it the just transition in Scotland, and that's what we're aiming for. It's making sure everybody gets the benefit of clean transport as an enabler to life. Net zero. There's a survey which has just recently been done. 67% of councils lack confidence in meeting their net zero goals within the stated timelines, and 90% reported that current national funding schemes were inadequate to fund their local net zero strategies. It concludes that the councils face an estimated £4 billion funding gap. UK 100, which is a representative organisation for 100 big local authorities, published a report, and its flagship Powers in Place report called on the government to move net zero funding to multi-year place-based grants to crowd in private investment and allow authorities to plan for the long-term strategies. What a good idea. And create a new local net zero delivery authority to coordinate local national net zero collaboration and ensure a statutory role for local authorities in the transition. I think it's fair to say at 10:30, wouldn't we all agree with that? Having an authority that delivers net zero locally and has the responsibility to make that happen. Sam, did you have a comment?
No, just long-term strategy. You're absolutely right. But with a short-term view of what government we've got, it's not going to be easy, is it?
No, it's not. You're absolutely right. Sadly, time has beaten the famous five, or the infamous five, should I say. If you've got any net zero or zero emission transport news stories you'd like us to cover, please send them to us at hello@evcafe.org. Until next Friday, it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from them. Thank you so much, everybody, for your comments today. It's been magnificent. This has been an EV Cafe production, brought to you this week in partnership with the Commercial Vehicle Show. You know what to do. Caroline.kirby@evcafe.org if you have any interest at all. 23rd to the 25th of April in Birmingham with the EV Cafe Village. Other sustainability news services are available, but this is just funner! The EV Cafe is truly blessed to be partnered with the AA Webfleet, Europe Car Plug Me In, Paythrough, Iveco, Zaptec, Drax, Spiri, Hydrock, Interval, and Dynamon. We are the EV Cafe, accelerating the transition to zero emission transport. Enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend, wherever it takes you. Thanks for the hugs. Thanks for the love. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Martin
Well done,
Sweeney.
Dom.